What's your name, scrub? From now on, you scrubby no Skrilla. Do you like that name? Well, there's one thing you won't like. You scrubs missing out on sick loot because you're too scared to pony up and play with the big boys. You will not laugh. You will not cry. You will learn by the numbers. I will teach you. You had best unfuck yourself or I will unscrew your head and shit down your neck, son. Now let me see your skrill face. You got a skrill face? Booyah! That's a skrill face. See you at Alpha Draft for fantasy trading 0800 hours. Now then, the first 6 teams were announced for the E-League, Turner Broadcasting's E-League, which will be obviously televised and is the one with like the $1.2 million prize purse. And so we had the first 6 teams announced for it, and they are Astralis, NIP, Mouse Sports, Cloud9, CLG, and Renegades. I guess I should have said Ninjas in Pajamas instead of NIP, since I gave only the acronym for NIP. So my first thoughts when I saw these first 6 names is the lack of elite teams here is disturbing. Because there is no Fnatic, number 1 ranked team in the world. There is no Na'Vi, the number 2 ranked team in the world. There is no Luminosity, a top 4 team in the world in terms of rankings. Envious, who yes have fallen off a bit now, but were the reigning major champions. They are in fact, and had some very good results up to the end of last year. They're not involved either. So the reason why this is worrying is because if you're going to make an announcement like this, conventional theory would be you'd lead with some strong names. Whereas in general, they haven't really got any of the big hard-hitting names here in terms of the best teams in the world. Now then, they do have Astralis. Now, Astralis are a top 5 team in the world. They're a very solid team. The good thing about Astralis is they very rarely lose to lesser teams. Aside from their upset in terms of losing a map to G2 on LAN, the only teams they've lost to on LAN are the best teams in the world. We're talking about Envious, Fnatic, Na'Vi, Luminosity, these sorts of teams. And obviously when we talk about Envious, we're talking about in the past when they were one of the best teams in the world. They don't lose to the lower teams. They're a team who are fantastic in group stages and league type formats, always done well online, always done well on group stage. So as a result, I actually feel like they would do very well in a league like this, especially from the teams we've seen so far. Now, from the teams we've got at the moment, these 6, Astralis would win this competition. They'd be the overwhelming favourite. They'd have all the odds on them. They've got a great map pool. They've got a very good balance of roles within the teams. They would be the favourite to win the E-League as of these 6 names without knowing who comes next. If no other top 5 teams are participating, they will be the favourite to win. I also think part of the reason they're so phenomenal in group stages and leagues is because there's less pressure on you. It's more like how you perform over a larger sample size of data. Well, that's great for Astralis because we know in terms of consistency, in terms of overall level, they're a very good team. They just suffer in that key big game or that one game that decides a whole series or decides a whole tournament deep in it. Well, that's not what happens in a league. So I think overall, Astralis would do very well in a league like this. And they are a solid name to have here. Yeah, there's a few names you'd rather have, but they're right there on the list. They're 4th or 5th on the list of the names you really want in the league. So, okay, that's a good one to start with. Then we go to NIP. Okay, NIP as a team, not very good right now. Haven't been elite for quite a while, actually. They were on the edge of it maybe at the very end of last year. Then they had that whole span of like 3 or 4 months where they really were out of it. The thing about NIP that's good for a league like this is they are fan favourites to this day. They still have a strong following, and Get Right is still a very good player. He's not quite a star player at the moment. He hasn't played that many LANs either with the new lineup. But Get Right and Forest always will be and still are box office. These guys have star power to their names. They have great histories that you could work with in terms of features, etc. And they will always be fan favourites. People will always enjoy watching them because they'll both have very entertaining styles of play, but in very different manner. And very compelling stories and career storylines and add a great narrative to the league. So NIP are a good addition in terms of storyline, fan favourites, etc. In terms of actual top teams, now yes, among this list, they're one of the better ones. But when you talk about elite teams in the world, they're not in there right now. Mouse Sports is a team where they're quite a confused lineup at the moment. They haven't won any big best of threes in a long time. They haven't won any big maps aside from the odd one here and there. They tend to be more well known actually for doing very well in losing efforts, which doesn't, moral victories mean nothing in terms of being a top team. And so the problem with the Mouse Sports is they're not that good a team, even in the context of these teams. They're just okay. But Nerf Sports is the Nico show. And Nico right now is one of the best players in the world. He's at the moment playing like a top 10 player in the world. So he's a very skilled player. He's someone who would definitely light up a league like this. It would be very fun to watch. Seeing him week in and week out, we'd really get to know how good he is as a player. Not just playing at the odd tournament and not just playing against better teams and losing. Now we get to see him against some lesser teams. Will he tear it up? Will he be an MVP of the whole league? Be interesting to find out, right? So at least we're adding more talented players to the league at this point in time. And overall, Mouse Sports obviously has solid talent and an okay map pool to where if they go up against the best NA teams, they're going to be a favourite. They're going to do very well. So they'd be a solid team within the league. Cloud9, they're fan favourites in the same way that NIP are over for the international scene. But for the NA scene, they've got guys like Nothing, Skadoodle, Shroud. People want to see these guys play. These are players who've always been quite popular ever since coming into their own, respectively. They're one of the best NA teams overall. I mean, they're not a very good team internationally, but one of the best NA teams at the moment. They are in bad form right now. This is the worst period ever in their history. But as an org, when you look at the resources they've invested in the past and can in the future, and then kind of the low position they're in now, if they get into an E-League and they're in a position where they have more exposure and people see that this is something that's going to continue for future seasons, it'll make it more of a place people want to go and people want to be a part of the league and people want to play a top team like Cloud9. I feel like the organization eventually is almost inevitable that it's going to bounce back and get a better lineup. So having Cloud9 there, decent placeholder type team. CLG at the moment, I think, are the best NA team over the last 4 to 5 months. They have the best NA player at the moment over the last 4 to 5 months, which is JDM. So that's good to have native talent in a North American league overall, to where it's situated. And one of the better players in the world, like a top 20 player in the world. They're a solid team overall. They never usually do terribly, despite what happened to that major qualifier. They're usually pretty consistent overall, and they tend to be pretty decent in leagues as well, you have to say. So, decent addition in terms of NA. Obviously not that sick internationally, but I have them 7th in my top 10 at the moment. Not because I think they're the 7th best team in the world, because that's how rankings work, and over the last 3 months, they have better rankings than everyone except 6 teams. Renegades. Now, Renegades has not been a good team for the last 7-8 months. In fact, they've never really been anywhere close to a really good team. They've broken in their top 10 very briefly. They were much improved at the major qualifier. Even though they didn't qualify in the end, their gun rounds were much better. Their T-sides were much better. They looked like a team that had decent fragging in terms of distribution across the team, instead of it just being JKS and Aza who had provided the fragging. Against the lesser competition at the moment we're looking like we're going to see from these first 6 games, and potentially some of the ones we can speculate later on, I do think that against that sort of competition, this is where JKS could become a star player. This is where he could show off his stuff, and against this less competition, he could show he can routinely win those 1v2s, those 1v1s, and become like a great lurker type player, because he impressed me at the major qualifier. I think he's a good player overall, but in general, I notice he's got good composure under pressure, so I'd like to see him against a lot of NA level teams and see how he'd do for a whole season on LAN. I think that'd be pretty cool. Obviously, as a team, not that great. So when you look at this lineup, the first 3 of the European teams starts really well, pretty decent for the other 2. In terms of the other 3, okay, yes, for NA as an overall region, assuming we'll count RNG Renegades within that, yeah, good picks, but not that great internationally at the moment. So a little bit underwhelming for these first 6 names. Now, if we think about the other teams that are likely to be in the league, now, unless Eleague, Turner, are pulling some little plot twist where it turns out, Fnatic and Na'Vi are in the league, but they're announcing those last so everyone gets super hyped. Unless that happens, it does look as though some of the names that are going to come are actually going to be more underwhelming than the names we've seen of so far. Like, for example, if all the other teams are from NA or are even worse EU teams, so let's think like Dignitas. Okay, yeah, a good team, a team that showed a lot of speciality, a team that looks like they're on the rise, but not on the level of those elite teams I mentioned. G2, a team with veterans, a team who doesn't lose to bad teams, a team who's a solid top 10 team, but isn't going to be knocking out the park and shouldn't be winning competitions really, but actually would have a chance here to be like a top 4 team. That'd be a little bit sad, I think. I mean, we think of some of the names that have been speculated and that we think we know about. Well, first of all, they haven't announced them here, which is quite weird to me, but we know Optic are in the league because they won the road to Vegas, so it's guaranteed Optic are in there. Now, Optic haven't been very good overall ever since they became Optic and didn't even manage to win the minor. Therefore, they were at the major qualifier. Echo Fox have actually said they're involved. Now, that's a lineup, but yeah, okay, we want to see Sean Gares in the league, that's great. You might like someone like, for example, I enjoyed watching TCK way back in the day when he was a good support player on Quantic, but this team doesn't look very good on paper. And this team looks like it's only in there because of the whole Echo Fox thing and the branding aspect, and maybe Rick Fox as well, because it's Turner and they've been involved with basketball in the past. This isn't a good team, and it isn't a good team in terms of international play, because we haven't seen them do anything yet in terms of LAN. Then you look at, it was implied early on that Complexity was going to be involved in some way. Now, we haven't seen anything from Complexity except for online games. They didn't go to the minor because they didn't have the fifth because of what went on there. So this is a team where we still don't know anything about them. They could be okay, they could be terrible. Then you go to NRG, it was implied might be involved again because of organisation. Now that I don't think looks very good at all. I like God B, I think he's a sick player in terms of his impact as an in-game leader, but as much as people are hyping some of their talents, they haven't shown us anything yet. So I have no reason to yet be hyped. I'd have to see them. So at the moment, I expect nothing from them. It was implied maybe Luminosity would be involved. I hope so, because they're a fantastic team right now, and it would bring a great element to the league. I think they'll be a very good team in the league to contend for the title. TSM also, it was implied, might be involved. No, TSM's lineup looks fucking terrible. It doesn't surprise me that they've already removed a player from that. Then you go over SK, maybe people were suggesting because of some of the people who are behind the league, maybe they'll get an in. SK haven't been very good. They've had the odd map win here and there. They obviously won that series over who at the time Team Question Mark, now Astralis at Fragment Masters, but I don't think that's indicative of much, and as a result you haven't seen much of them since then, and they went out of the major qualifier without much fanfare whatsoever. So those aren't impressive names, and let's hope those aren't the other names coming. Now, I will say, if you get a couple more elite teams in there, it's not the end of the world that they don't have all of them. Because let's say you had Astralis, let's say Luminosity, Envious. So, okay, there's three solid ones. Let's say you had those ones and then like Virtus Pro. Okay, you wouldn't have Fnatic and Na'Vi. But if Luminosity, if Astralis are doing really sick in the league and they're battling each other and they're winning like back-to-back weeks and then one of them wins the league, it would set up its own special storyline where then you'd be like, right, well, Luminosity were doing great there. I'd like to see them at the major versus Fnatic. How would that work out? That would have its own storyline, which has a charm to it. It's not as good, I don't think, as having a proper circuit where everyone plays, but you can at least see something that would build up there. I must say, at the end of it, if it's announced eventually that there aren't that many more sick teams there, and then I find out that most of the teams are just going to play in the ESL League and that they're just going to play elsewhere, I probably will do a video where I wreck a lot of these orgs, because this is a league that has TV exposure, where you can potentially get non-endemic sponsors. You can potentially get massive people who can inject a lot in your team. You can build a brand in front of a base of people in North America who maybe currently don't follow esports that much and Counter-Strike Global Offensive. There's more prize money in this league than the other ones. If you're not helping that out, you're not giving it a chance to, you're not even taking part to win that prize money and get those sponsors, then it's kind of like, just for your own very short-term interest, it feels like you're working against actually CSGO and the growth of the game, etc. So those same people who profess to want all that, I'll probably wreck them if they aren't involved. Anyway, those are my thoughts on the first 6 teams. Let's see who is to come, and let's see whether they have saved something later on, or whether the next names are going to be a little more underwhelming.